Welcome to our deep dive exploring David Sklansky's Getting the Best of It.
Oh, this will be fun.
It's all about making smarter gambling choices. Whether you're after thrills or looking to make a profit,
Right.
we'll unpack the math behind all sorts of games so you can up your game.
The book really digs into the math. It's fascinating how Sklansky takes apart this whole idea of luck
Oh.
and shows how it's more about getting the odds or skill in your favor. Like he calls that getting the best of it.
Okay, let's break that down. What does it actually mean to have the odds or skills on your side?
Well, Sklansky really focuses on something called mathematical expectation.
Okay,
Basically, it's like the average you'd expect to win or lose on a bet over time.
I see.
So it takes into account how likely you are to win
Right.
and how much you could win or lose.
So you're saying it's not just about winning every single bet.
Exactly.
It's about making bets that statistically you're going to come out ahead in the long run.
Yes. He has this great example with gin rummy. Imagine you have a 60% chance of winning a $10 game.
All right?
That means your mathematical expectation is $2 per game, meaning you're likely to make $2 per game on average over time.
I get it. So even if you lose some games, overall you're still making money.
Exactly.
That's a really good illustration. I like that. So Sklansky goes on to analyze different casino games.
Yes,
And he kind of breaks them down in terms of how beatable they are, right?
exactly. He goes deep on blackjack. Many people consider it a beatable game if you play it right.
Really?
Oh, for sure. He talks about card counting, this technique where you keep track of the ratio of high cards to low cards in the deck.
I've heard of card counting, but never fully understood it.
It's basically about being aware of what cards have already been dealt,
I see.
because that changes the odds for the remaining cards, and that influences whether you should hit, stand, double down, or split.
So it's not like you have to memorize every single card.
No.
It's about understanding how the composition of the deck is changing.
Exactly. And he mentions this historical method, the 10-count method, from Edward Thorp's book, Beat the Dealer.
Oh, wow. So there's a whole history to this.
Definitely.
Okay. What about roulette? Is there a way to beat the wheel?
Generally, no. Roulette's pretty unbeatable because of what's called the house edge.
Oh, right.
But Sklansky does bring up this interesting idea of biased wheels. If you analyze thousands and thousands of spins and notice a certain number is hitting more often than it should.
Oh, like if the wheel is somehow rigged?
Kind of, though modern roulette wheels have safeguards to prevent that.
So it's not a very reliable strategy.
Not really, but it's an interesting thought. All right, let's move on to craps.
Okay.
Sklansky talks about how craps is generally unbeatable in casinos, but there are certain circumstances in private games where you can actually gain an edge.
Really? What kind of circumstances?
Well, it has to do with the rules. In casinos, double sixes are usually not allowed, but in some private games they are. And if double sixes are allowed, consistently betting against a shooter actually gives you a slight advantage, mathematically speaking.
So rule variations can make a huge difference.
They really can. Now, beyond those casino games, Sklansky also looks at sports betting and horse racing.
Both of which seem very hard to predict.
They definitely are. So with sports betting, the bookmakers, they make money by setting the odds and also by taking a commission.
Oh, I've heard it called vigorish.
That's it. So to win consistently at sports betting, you need to find bets where the bookmakers' odds are off.
So it's not just about rooting for your favorite team.
Not at all. Sklansky actually suggests focusing on smaller underdogs because the public tends to bet on the favorites that can push the odds too far in the favorites' direction.
So there's more value in betting on the underdog.
Sometimes, yes. All right, now let's talk horse racing. It's tricky to beat the track because there's this thing called a takeout, about 20%, that goes to the state and the track itself.
That's a pretty big chunk right off the top.
Yes, it is. So you really need to find what are called overlays.
Overlays.
Yeah, horses where the odds are higher than their actual chances of winning. Sklansky tells this great story about a handicapper who was very successful betting on sprinters in longer races.
Sprinters. Those are the horses that are good at short distances.
Yes, exactly. And everyone assumed they couldn't win a longer race.
But they did.
Yeah, because the handicapper noticed that the sprinter's initial burst would tire out the other horses, and then they could pull ahead later in the race.
Wow, that's clever.
Right. It just goes to show that you can find an edge if you're paying attention and understand the math behind it.
I love that. Speaking of finding an edge, have you heard any stories about casinos making mistakes in their promotions that savvy gamblers could exploit?
Absolutely. Slansky talks about several cases where he actually profited from casinos making errors in their math. It's pretty amazing.
Oh, do tell.
One that stands out is the Union Plaza Casino. They had this promotion with their double zero roulette wheel.
A double zero wheel. That already sounds risky.
It is. It's got 38 slots instead of the usual 36, so the odds are worse for the player.
Right. So what was their promotion?
They were offering even money on single number bets that landed on 0 or double zero.
That sounds good for the casino.
It seemed that way, but it actually gave players a positive mathematical expectation.
Wait, what? How did that happen?
Think about it. The chance of hitting 0 or double zero is 2 out of 38, right?
Okay, yeah.
That's like 5.3%. So by paying even money on those bets, the casino was basically overpaying, making it likely that a player could profit over time.
So Sklansky just kept betting on 0 or double zero and took advantage of their mistake.
Exactly. He figured out how much he could expect to profit and played accordingly. Pretty brilliant.
It's incredible how understanding the math can turn a seemingly bad game into a good one. Were there any other promotions like that?
Oh, yeah. There was this one at the Fremont Casino. They were offering even money on blackjacks.
I don't get it. How's that a mistake?
Well, in blackjack, blackjacks are usually paid out at 3 to 2. And that's a big part of why card counting works.
So by offering even money, it hurt the card counters.
Not quite. It actually made it easier for them to exploit the casino when the deck was in their favor.
Interesting.
Because they could pinpoint those times when the probability of getting a blackjack was higher and then cash in on the even money payout.
Wow. So a seemingly minor rule change can have a big impact.
Huge impact. Sklansky and other skilled players were able to take advantage of that. It just shows that you always have to be aware of the underlying math.
I'll say.
Oh.
Do casinos still make those kinds of errors in their promotions?
It's less common now because casinos are much more savvy about the math.
Right.
They know about these potential exploits. But it's always possible for them to make mistakes, especially with more complex promotions.
It seems like you really have to pay attention to the fine print.
Absolutely. Now, moving beyond specific games, Sklansky also discusses some really interesting general gambling concepts. Well, one thing he talks about is this idea that even a bet with a positive expectation might not be a good bet.
I am a bit confused. If you're expected to win, why wouldn't you take the bet?
Let me give you an example. Suppose someone offers you a bet where you have a 60% chance of winning $2,000
Okay.
and a 40% chance of losing $1,000. Would you take that bet?
Well, yeah, the potential reward outweighs the risk.
Exactly. Now imagine this. That same person offers you a second bet with the same odds,
Okay.
but you can only take the second bet if you win the first one. If you lose the first bet, you're out.
So the second bet depends on the first. How does that change things?
Well, even though the second bet is statistically a good bet, just like the first one, the fact that you have to win the first bet to even participate in the second bet actually makes your overall expected winnings lower.
I don't quite get it. How can that be?
Because if you lose that first bet, you miss out on the chance to play the second, potentially lucrative bet.
Ah, I see. It's like you're being penalized for winning the first bet.
You could think of it that way. Sklansky's point is that you have to consider not just the immediate odds of a single bet, but the potential consequences of a series of bets and the opportunities you might miss.
That makes a lot of sense. It's not just about finding good individual bets, but about managing your overall betting strategy.
Exactly. It's about looking at the big picture.
I like that. Big picture thinking. Okay, so Sklansky stresses the importance of knowing when to quit, even if you're ahead.
He does. It can be really hard to walk away from a winning streak, but knowing when to quit is just as crucial as knowing when to bet.
But it's tempting to try to win even more.
It is, but Sklansky argues that a big win, especially in a game where the house has an edge, can be a signal that it's time to leave.
So you don't give your winnings back to the casino.
Right. He uses the analogy of hitting a big jackpot on a slot machine. That's the perfect time to walk away.
Why?
Because the odds of hitting another jackpot, especially one that big, are incredibly slim. If you keep playing, you're more likely to lose those winnings back to the machine.
So it's about accepting that luck can be sleeting.
Exactly. And this applies to other games, too. If you have a really good run at blackjack, it might be wise to cash out and walk away.
Don't push your luck.
Right. And this ties into Sklansky's distinction between skill and luck.
What does he say about that?
He argues that while luck is always a factor in gambling, skill is what separates the consistent winners from those who just get lucky every now and then.
So relying on hunches and superstitions isn't enough.
Not if you want to consistently get the best of it. Skill means understanding the math behind the games, developing sound strategies, and being able to make rational decisions even under pressure.
That sounds especially important for a game like poker.
Absolutely. Poker is a game where skill can really make a difference. Players can gain an edge through strategic betting, bluffing, reading their opponents, things like that.
Since Sklansky is a legendary poker player, I bet he has some great insights on that.
He does. He talks about how understanding the math of poker is essential for making good decisions, but logic and psychology play crucial roles too.
Okay, we've touched on the math side, but what about the logic part?
Well, logic comes in when you're looking at all the available information. Your hand, the community cards, your opponent's betting patterns,
I see.
and you have to use logic to figure out the most likely scenarios. It's like piecing together a puzzle.
So you're trying to deduce what your opponents have based on the evidence.
Exactly. But you also need to understand psychology, how your opponents are feeling, what their motivations are.
So it's not just about the cards, it's about understanding human behavior.
Yes. Sklansky argues that the best poker players are masters of all three: math, logic, and psychology.
That's fascinating. It seems like those skills could be helpful in other types of gambling too.
Definitely. The specifics might vary depending on the game, but the underlying principles of strategic thinking, risk assessment, and psychological awareness apply across the board.
I love how Sklansky shows that gambling isn't just about luck, but about using a combination of skills to influence the outcome.
He really challenges that perception. It's about making calculated choices and not just leaving everything to chance. Speaking of calculated choices, he also has this interesting idea about playing scared.
Playing scared, what does that mean?
He talks about this in the context of high-stakes gambling, particularly poker. It's basically when the fear of losing takes over and prevents you from making the best decisions.
You get paralyzed by fear.
Kind of. And that fear can come from a lack of confidence, a fear of embarrassment, or even a fear of success.
Fear of success. That's weird. Why would anyone be afraid of winning?
Well, sometimes success can bring more pressure, higher expectations, more scrutiny from others, and some people aren't comfortable with that.
So playing scared isn't just about losing money.
No, it's a psychological thing that can really affect your judgment. Sklansky says overcoming this fear is essential for achieving consistent success, especially in high-stakes games.
You have to believe in yourself and not let fear hold you back.
Exactly. And this applies to other areas of life too, not just gambling. Anytime you're facing a high-pressure situation, whether it's in business, sports, or anything else, it's important to manage your fear and make the best choices you can.
I love that. Now, what are super games in poker?
Super games are basically poker games with incredibly high stakes. They attract the best players in the world. Sklansky talks about what makes these games so unique and how to thrive in such a demanding environment.
So it's like the ultimate test for poker players.
You could say that. The psychological aspect becomes even more crucial in these games because there's so much money on the line. Even a small mistake or emotional slip-up can cost you a fortune.
So it's not just about playing your cards right. It's about staying calm and focused under immense pressure.
Absolutely. Sklansky says psychological warfare and exploiting your opponent's weaknesses become even more important in super games.
Sounds intense. Anything else that makes these games different?
The math also gets more complicated because even small differences in odds can translate to huge sums of money.
So you have to be even more precise with your calculations.
Exactly. You need to be constantly adapting your approach based on what's happening in the game.
It seems like super games require a whole other level of mastery, both in terms of poker skills and mental toughness.
They do. Sklansky describes them as the pinnacle of poker competition, where the best of the best push themselves to their limits.
That's pretty amazing. It gives you a glimpse into the world of elite poker and the challenges they face.
It does. Okay, let's switch gears back to some more general concepts. We talked about mathematical expectation earlier. Can you remind us what that is again?
Sure. Sklansky really hammers this point home throughout the book. Mathematical expectation, sometimes called expected value, is basically the average outcome you can expect from a bet over time, taking into account both the probability of winning and the potential payout.
It's a fundamental principle in gambling.
Yes, and Sklansky emphasizes that consistently making bets with a positive mathematical expectation is essential for long-term success.
He's right about that. Can you give us a simple example of how it works?
Sure. Let's say you flip a coin with a friend, and you each bet $10.
Okay, that's a fair bet. 50-50 odds.
Exactly. In that scenario, your mathematical expectation is 0.
0. Why is that?
Because over many coin flips, you're expected to win half the time and lose half the time.
I see.
So your average winnings will cancel out your average losses, leaving you with no net gain or loss.
So even though you might win or lose on individual flips, over time you're not expected to come out ahead or behind.
Exactly. Now let's say your friend offers you a different bet.
Okay.
You win $12 if it's heads, but you only use $8 if it's tails.
That sounds like a better deal for you.
It is. Your mathematical expectation is now positive.
How do you calculate that?
You multiply the potential win by its probability and then subtract the potential loss multiplied by its probability.
So in this case, it would be $12 times 0.5 minus $8 times 0.5, which equals $2.
Right. So your expected winnings per coin flip are $2.
That's your expected value, yes. And over many flips, you're statistically likely to average a $2 profit per flip.
Even though you'll still lose some flips, overall you're expected to come out ahead.
Exactly. This highlights the importance of finding bets where the potential reward and the probability of winning combine to create a positive mathematical expectation.
You want to tilt the odds in your favor, even if it's just a little bit.
That's the key. Now, Sklansky acknowledges that calculating mathematical expectation can be complicated, especially in games like poker, where there are many variables.
Yeah, poker is all about assessing probabilities, considering your opponent's actions, and making calculated bets based on incomplete information.
It can be tough. But Sklansky provides tools and strategies to help you approach these calculations systematically.
So even if you can't calculate the exact probabilities in the heat of the moment, it's still important to have a good understanding of the concept.
Absolutely. It's about developing a sense of whether a particular bet or action is likely to pay off in the long run.
You want to balance the excitement of gambling with the mathematical realities of your choices.
Exactly. This concept is especially relevant when it comes to casino games.
Because most casino games have a built-in house edge, right?
Right. The house edge is a mathematical advantage that ensures the casino will profit over time.
So even though players might win sometimes, the odds are ultimately stacked against them.
That's the reality of casino gambling. But understanding mathematical expectation can help you make smarter choices about which games to play and how to manage your money.
So while you can't completely eliminate the house edge, you can at least minimize your losses by choosing games with lower edges and playing strategically.
Exactly. Knowledge is power, and understanding the math behind gambling can make you a more informed and responsible player.
And hopefully a more successful one, too. This brings us to another important topic, bankroll management.
Bankroll management is crucial for any gambler, regardless of their experience or the games they play.
It's about protecting your gambling funds, right?
Yeah. Exactly. It means betting only what you can comfortably afford to lose.
So setting limits and sticking to them, even when you're tempted to chase losses or bet bigger.
Yes. Sklansky acknowledges that even the best gamblers experience losing streaks. A well-managed bankroll helps you weather those downturns without jeopardizing your financial well-being.
You need to keep your gambling money separate from your everyday expenses.
Absolutely. He also warns against chasing losses.
Chasing losses.
It's that urge to increase your bets after a loss in an attempt to win back what you've lost quickly.
Oh, I've definitely felt that before. It's like you're trying to break even.
Exactly. And it's a dangerous trap that many gamblers fall into. Sklansky says chasing losses often leads to even bigger losses.
Because you start making irrational decisions.
Right. Your emotions can cloud your judgment. He emphasizes the importance of having a betting plan and sticking to it, even when you're losing.
That seems especially important with games like slot machines, where the odds are always against you.
Absolutely. With slot machines, it's crucial to set a budget and stop playing when you reach it, whether you're winning or losing.
You should treat it like any other form of entertainment, like going to the movies.
Exactly. Know your limits and enjoy the experience without putting yourself at risk. Now, let's talk about variance.
Variance. I've heard that term before, but I'm not sure I fully understand it.
Variance is essentially the degree to which actual results can differ from expected results over a certain period.
So it's about the ups and downs that are inherent in any gambling activity.
Exactly. Even if you're playing games with a positive mathematical expectation, you're going to experience periods of winning and losing. Variance affects how big those swings can be.
So even if you're playing perfectly, you can still have losing streaks.
Absolutely. Variance is a natural part of gambling, and understanding it is important for managing your expectations and making rational decisions. Can you give an example of how variance works in practice?
Sure. Let's say you're playing blackjack and you're a skilled card counter. You found a favorable situation where the deck is rich in high cards, so you have an edge over the house.
So you're playing with a positive mathematical expectation.
Yes, but that doesn't guarantee you'll win every hand. You might hit a streak of bad luck where the cards just don't go your way, even though you're making the right decisions.
So variance can lead to short-term losses even when the long-term odds are in your favor.
Exactly. On the flip side, you might also experience periods of incredible luck where you win hand after hand, even when it seems statistically improbable.
Sklansky emphasizes that understanding variance is key to staying emotionally stable and making sound decisions, even when the results don't immediately reflect your expectations.
You have to accept that swings will happen and not overreact to them.
Right. The key is to focus on making the best possible decisions, regardless of the outcome of any single bet or hand, and trust that the math will work out in the long run.
It's about discipline and sticking to your strategy, even when things aren't going your way. Now, how does variance work differently in skill-based games versus games of pure chance?
In skill-based games like poker, you can reduce the impact of variance by playing strategically and making good decisions. Skilled players can minimize the influence of luck.
So skill can smooth out those swings.
To some extent, yes. But in games of pure chance, like roulette or slot machines, there's nothing you can do to control variance. The outcomes are entirely random.
So in those games, you're just at the mercy of luck.
Pretty much. Sklansky says it's important to understand this distinction so you can set realistic expectations and choose games that match your risk tolerance and skill level.
This has been an incredible journey through David Sklansky's Getting the Best of It. We've covered so much ground: mathematical expectation, bankroll management, understanding variance, knowing when to walk away.
His book is a treasure trove of valuable insights for anyone who wants to approach gambling more intelligently and responsibly.
He really stresses the importance of understanding the math, but he also gives great practical advice on managing your emotions and staying disciplined.
Whether you're a seasoned gambler or a novice, Sklansky's wisdom can help you make better decisions, enjoy the experience more, and improve your chances of winning.
He also encourages a balanced perspective on gambling, recognizing that luck is always a factor, but also understanding that you can use knowledge, strategy, and psychology to tilt the scales in your favor.
Well said. The more we understand about the games we play and the forces at play, the better equipped we are to make informed choices, manage risks, and truly get the best of it in this exciting world of gambling. Sklansky talks about this thing he calls the worst play in blackjack.
Yeah.
The worst possible move you can make.
It's not so much about a single bad decision. It's more about not thinking about how your actions affect the whole deck, for future hands.
So taking a more strategic view, not just focusing on the current hand.
Right. He gives this example of drawing a card when you have a weak hand. A weak hand, meaning like you're probably not going to improve it by taking another card and you might go bust.
Exactly. So let's say you have a 16 and the dealer is showing a 10.
Okay.
A lot of people would say you should hit in that situation.
Right. Seems like the logical thing to do.
But Sklansky says if you've been paying attention to the cards that have already been dealt, and you know there are mostly low cards left in the deck.
Hitting becomes a lot riskier.
Exactly, because if you draw a low card, it doesn't help you beat the dealer's 10.
And it increases your chances of going over 21.
Right. What's interesting is that he argues this seemingly small decision.
Taking a card when you're already in a bad spot.
Yeah. Can actually hurt you more in the long run than making a mathematically wrong choice on a double down or split.
Because it's not just about that one hand, it's about how it affects your chances in the hands to come.
Exactly. You're basically changing the composition of the deck in a way that could work against you later, especially if you're card counting.
That's a subtle point, but I can see how it's important. You're playing the long game.
Right. Thinking ahead. It's like he's saying, don't just look at the trees, look at the whole forest.
I like that analogy.
Yeah.
So he's encouraging us to be more strategic, even with those little decisions.
Absolutely. All right, switching gears a bit, Sklansky also talks about Bayes' theorem. It's this mathematical concept.
Bayes' theorem. Sounds intimidating. I'm not a math whiz.
It can sound complicated, but it's a really useful tool for making better decisions, even if you're not a math expert. Let me try to explain it simply. Imagine you're at a horse race.
Okay.
There are 3 horses running.
All right.
You have some idea of which horse is most likely to win based on their past performance, stuff like that.
So we have some initial probabilities for each horse.
Right. Now, let's say you overhear a really knowledgeable horse racing expert say, "I'm positive a filly will win this race."
Okay, so now we know it's going to be one of the female horses.
Yeah.
That changes things.
Exactly. Bayes' theorem gives us a way to update our initial probabilities based on this new information.
So we're combining what we already knew with this expert's opinion.
Right. The theorem tells us how to adjust those probabilities, giving us a more accurate estimate of which horse is most likely to win.
So we're using the expert's knowledge to refine our own beliefs.
Precisely. And this can be applied to all sorts of situations, not just horse racing. It's used in medicine, finance, even artificial intelligence.
So it's about using new evidence to make better decisions. Does Sklansky give any examples of how this applies to gambling?
Oh, absolutely. Think about a poker game. You see your opponent make a big, aggressive bet.
Your first thought might be that they have a really strong hand.
That's a natural assumption. But Bayes' theorem tells us to consider other possibilities, too. We have to factor in their past betting patterns, their style of play.
And the possibility that they might be bluffing.
Exactly. So by incorporating all of this information, we might conclude that while they could have a strong hand, there's also a good chance they're bluffing.
So we're using Bayes' theorem to reevaluate the situation.
Right. And that can help us decide how to respond to their bet.
It seems like a powerful tool for dealing with uncertainty and making smarter decisions, especially in games like poker where there's a lot of hidden information.
It is. Sklansky really highlights the importance of thinking critically, updating your beliefs based on new evidence, and making decisions rooted in logic and probability.
It's a lesson we can all apply to many aspects of our lives, not just gambling. Now, Sklansky also delves into the psychological side of gambling. You know how our emotions can affect our decisions.
Yes, and this is where the concept of tilting comes in.
Tilting.
It's something a lot of poker players experience, especially in high-stakes games.
What does it mean?
Tilting is when you let your emotions, usually frustration or anger, cloud your judgment and lead you to make bad decisions.
So you lose your cool and start acting impulsively.
Exactly. Sklansky says it often happens after a string of bad luck or a few really unlucky hands.
When it feels like the cards are against you.
Right. A player who's tilting might start betting recklessly, chasing losses, or playing overly aggressively, trying to get even or prove a point.
So they're not thinking clearly. They're letting their emotions take over.
Exactly. And he emphasizes that tilting can be really damaging to a poker player's performance.
Because it throws them off their game and prevents them from making good decisions.
Right. He suggests a few ways to deal with tilting. First, you have to be aware of it. Recognize those physical and emotional signs. Your heart rate goes up, you feel frustrated, you start getting angry.
So self-awareness is key.
It is. And once you recognize you're tilting, he recommends taking a break from the game, maybe doing some deep breathing exercises, or something else to help you relax and refocus.
Step away from the table, cool down.
Exactly. He also talks about the importance of developing a positive mindset and focusing on the long term rather than dwelling on those short-term setbacks.
Don't let a few bad beats get you down.
Right. It's all about perspective. And good bankroll management can also help prevent tilting.
How so?
If you're playing with money you can afford to lose, the emotional stakes are lower, you're less likely to get upset if you lose, which helps you stay calm and make better decisions.
It takes pressure off.
Exactly. Sklansky's insights on tilting really highlight the importance of emotional intelligence in gambling. You have to master your mind as well as the game itself.
That's such a valuable lesson, and it applies to so much more than just gambling.
It really does. Anytime you're in a situation where your emotions are running high, it's essential to be able to control them and make rational choices. Now, as we wrap up our deep dive into Sklansky's Getting the Best of It, I want to leave our listeners with one final thought.
Okay, I'm intrigued.
Sklansky argues that sometimes the best decision you can make in a gambling situation is not to bet at all, even if the math says you should.
Wait, if you're expected to win, why wouldn't you bet?
He says there are certain circumstances where you need to consider more than just the mathematical expectation. He uses this hypothetical business deal as an example.
Okay, lay it on me.
Imagine you have the opportunity to invest in a venture with a 60% chance of making $1 million profit.
Sounds promising.
But there's a 40% chance you'll lose $500,000.
Okay, so the potential reward is bigger than the potential loss.
Right. But Sklansky says you also need to think about the bigger picture. What if losing that $500,000 would bankrupt you?
That changes things.
Exactly. His point is that even if the odds are in your favor, you might be better off not taking the bet if the potential downside is too great.
You have to weigh the risks and rewards carefully and make sure the bet aligns with your overall financial goals and your risk tolerance.
Exactly. It's about responsible gambling, making choices that are right for you, even if it means passing up a statistically good bet.
That's a great takeaway. So, to sum up our exploration of David Sklansky's Getting the Best of It, he teaches us about mathematical expectation, managing variance, the psychology of tilting, and knowing when to walk away.
We've learned so much from him about approaching gambling in a more informed, strategic, and responsible way.
And now, as promised, we'd like to offer our listeners a quick recap of 10 key takeaways from our deep dive into David Sklansky's Getting the Best of It.
Excellent idea. Let's arm them with some actionable advice to elevate their gambling experience. First and foremost, consistently engage in bets with a positive mathematical expectation, your compass for long-term success in the gambling world.
Next, remember that while card counting can give you an advantage in blackjack, it's about more than just tracking the count. You need to consider those key cards and adjust your play accordingly.
Third, keep in mind that while most casino games are unbeatable in the long run, understanding the math can help you minimize losses by identifying situations with a lower house edge.
Fourth, to succeed in sports betting, focus on finding bets where the bookmaker's line is off. And remember that leaning towards underdogs can sometimes be a profitable strategy.
Fifth, never fall for the fallacy of the law of averages. Remember, past results don't influence future outcomes in games of independent trials like coin flips or roulette spins.
Sixth, grasp the counterintuitive best horse, worst pick paradox, where adding erratic competitors to a race can surprisingly decrease the winning probability of the most consistent contender.
Seventh, know when to quit, especially when playing at a disadvantage, as big losses and even big wins can signal the right moment to walk away.
Eighth, although casinos offer a service by assuming the risk of bets, remember that excessively high house edges, such as those found in games like Keno, can be unfair and exploitative.
Ninth, advocating for fairer odds in games might encourage players to stay longer, potentially benefiting both casinos and players in the long run.
And finally, number 10, approach gambling with a responsible mindset, setting limits, managing your bankroll wisely, and always prioritizing your overall financial well-being.
It's been a fantastic journey exploring these concepts with you. Remember, knowledge is your most powerful tool in the world of gambling, so keep learning, strategize effectively, and above all, gamble responsibly.
This concludes our deep dive into David Sklansky's Getting the Best of It. Hopefully, you've gained some valuable insights to enhance your gambling experiences, whether you're seeking pure entertainment or aiming for those exciting victories.
It's been a pleasure, and remember, the more you know about the games you play, the better equipped you'll be to make smart decisions, manage risks, and truly get the best of it in this thrilling world of chance and wagers.